BLIP Applied, Chapter 7, BLIP at program level. So like I said earlier, I'm now going to enter a number of examples that can show you how I've applied the BLIP considerations, but also the BLIP phases and decisions in curriculum design. So the first example that I have is from the postgraduate certificate in management education. And again, I started here with the very simple question of how much blended do we actually want and what do we know about the cohort who is going to be on the course. So this was a program that that I designed from scratch, and it has sort of a 75% online learning and 25% face-to-face. So we've got 4 modules. 3 of them are going to take place online over a period of sort of 5 months. And then in the last month, we have a 3-day summer school, which is the practice module. What you can see here, though, what was important is that instead of taking a sort of weekly approach, sequential approach, I took a sort of more flexible topic-led approach. So for instance, if you look at the introduction module down here, there's 3 topics, and they then split into sort of subtopics as well. But what I allowed students here to do is to choose how much they study within each of those, but also which one they're going to access first. And this actually created a really nice dynamic in the webinars because people brought in different perspectives, and then we were linking them together. And also in the one-to-one sessions that I did with each of the students along the way, we could really dive deep into their interests, and that really heightened their motivation to continue going because they felt it was relevant to them. Another approach here is a part-time master's program for business analytics. And again, we started with the same sort of question: how much blended do we actually want? What do we know about the cohort? So they're part-time students, they're working, they have limited resources in terms of time, but also getting from A to B, maybe they're in London, etc. So this is a sort of more sequential approach, very different to the one that I showed you earlier, where we have 3 sort of face-to-face interventions, and then asynchronous communication and synchronous communication set in between, nicely sort of giving way. And we were also then thinking about the learning growth along the way, which is here now indicated by proposed focus, group project, and feedback on this sort of assignments as well. So you can see here that we carefully thought about what would be valuable to the students and how can the sort of blended learning approach really facilitate that. And it doesn't matter which approach you take, a sort of more abstract if you want, or a sort of more sequential structured approach. But the first question is really about how much blended, and then thinking about what is driving it. So in this case, our business school strategy was driving both approaches, but also that we wanted to be sort of more open and more flexible for the learners. The next example is for an external Russell Group University who wants to offer a part-time blended learning certificate in business management. And I was responsible for the curriculum design, especially the planning phase. Now here you can see that I've been given quite a lot of information up front that was very rigid. So they had the dates ready, they knew from what time to time they wanted to teach when it was face-to-face, but also how many weeks there were in between. The 2-day schools, they knew that they wanted 2 full-day schools, and so on. So I was able to be creative here with the content and how I'm going to put it all together and how I'm going to integrate it and how I'm going to align it. So again, this is a very nice example of how we first answered a sort of question around how much blended is it, which approach shall we choose? And in this case, they wanted a sort of more sequential approach, and that's absolutely fine. There is no better or worse. It really depends on how you want to facilitate the learning and who is going to be on that sort of cohort. So there were 3 units for this certificate in strategic business management. And so the certificate in business management was split into 2 certificates, one in strategic business management and one in operational business management. So the example here is for the first one. Then there's unit 2, which was on accounting and finance. Again, I had the same sort of structure and the same sort of information, and I ensured that there is going to be consistency between the 2, but also in terms of what they can expect in terms of learning. which for mature learners, as it is this in case here, is quite important because they might not have that experience of learning. And then Unit 3 marketing again followed the same sort of structure with the day schools and then the online learning and what is happening there actually. And in the course guide that are written in addition to outlining this here, where I take all these considerations on board, I explained the integration of blogs, for instance, of summative assessment and so on, and how I can envisage that students are actually learning. Now, the final example is a backbone integration, which means that I was asked to work with somebody to think about how we can integrate international responsible leadership, so a number of different keywords in an undergraduate program. So that's over 4 years. And here the most important aspects were around the learning context, the learning channels that we can use, and then the learning growth, obviously. So we knew the context. We knew that we wanted something that has an international component that aims at the aspects of responsible, ethical, sustainable, and leadership. And we were thinking of bringing into the program structure with a blended approach, so that is related to all the other modules as well, and using a number of different channels to facilitate that. And in terms of growing, thinking about the assessments that each of the different modules have and integrating them with that sort of backbone structure. And there's quite a lot of reflection going on, for instance. I'm going to show you that now as well. But first, let's have a look at the channels. So again, we were talking about having a number of face-to-face workspaces, digital workspaces that we create, guest speakers online, but also face-to-face. The creation of virtual trade shows, but also the use of business simulation software, and the number of webinars for various size of cohorts, but also group-specific webinars. So there again, there is this sort of limitless possibilities that we talked about before that we were thinking about to bring that in. So from the learning growth perspective here we can see that there's a lot of reflection going on, because that is very useful, especially if you have subject-specific modules, to then ask students, okay, what does that sort of, how does that help you to think about the topic and your program in a wider perspective, for instance. So I hope these sort of examples at program level give you a bit of an idea of how I applied BLIP phases, BLIP considerations, and make decisions at the very beginning.